Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional and provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by... Oh, thanks, Basil, joining the party with your tambourine. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. Red Clover works with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media agencies, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
So what's going on with you today?
You got a lot of multitasking over there. You're trying to pet the dog, deal with the phone you forgot to turn off, move the water bottle.
And I've failed at all of it, according to my
Still
wife.
have dog hair on the mic. It's awesome.
Well, let's get on to better topics and introduce our guest, which I'm excited to have today. So we have Philip Lewis, who is a partner with Fulcrum Equity Partners. He currently serves on the board of directors of Kevel, Stratazan, Advantum Health, GoPivot, and LiveSource. He previously served on the boards of Fat Merchant, MFG.com, and ASL Resolvian. He previously worked with SaaS Optics, helping implement operational cadences and revenue partnerships, as well as working with the team through its successful exit. Additionally, he served as CFO of Rival Health and helped guide the company through its merger with G Behavior, now branded GoPivot. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What did you have for breakfast? You're like in
What?
Radio DJ voice going on.
I don't know.
Here.
I've got it going on today.
Yes,
I know.
You're very excited.
Well, there you have it.
Well, Philip, it's so exciting to have you here today. We always like to start with understanding how your career has progressed to what you're doing today. So if you can, share with us a little bit of your journey.
Yeah, so a little bit of a non-traditional route to get into venture capital. Got laid off, so that's always a great way to start. But working in investment banking with A.G. Edwards back in the day when Wachovia was buying them. And when they got laid off, Fulcrum was looking, just happened to be looking for an analyst. They were just starting. So it was just the three founders at the time raising our first fund. And I got connected to them through kind of 3 degrees of separation and joined really at the start. So been here doing this for about 15 years now. It kind of just progressed up the chain from analyst to partner, taking a few different detours, as you mentioned, into a few different companies and some various operating roles, helping with growth, helping with finance. And yeah, just been an interesting journey. I love working with entrepreneurs, love helping them grow.
Thank you for sharing. I think lots of people start all kinds of new careers when they are laid off or, circumstances present themselves. So I think it's worked out for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
So, Philip, what we're going to talk a lot about today is about cyber risk on deals. And so I'd like to begin by asking you, how has cybersecurity and privacy changed how you evaluate deal risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a constantly evolving topic. Back 15 years ago, I don't think there really was a lot of thought put into it. Frankly, there wasn't, ransomware wasn't on the forefront of people's minds. Cyber breaches weren't on the forefront. I mean, frankly, SaaS was just beginning at that point, or really just beginning to go mainstream. At this point, it is at the forefront of your mind on any transaction you're looking at. I think the whole diligence process, before you would never ask questions around, what does your perimeter security look like? What is your mobile device management? What is multi-factor authentication? Do you have it in place? And frankly, just over the last couple of years, before you didn't really think about all the different endpoints you're working with. You need to make sure people's home access is safe, because before you just really had to worry about them logging on at work. Now everyone's logging in at home. So I think the level of diligence you have to do, the number of questions you ask on the front end, make sure that you don't end up in a precarious situation has really changed and evolved over the last couple decade and a half, and really again over the last 2 years.
So as you go through that diligence and you're identifying and asking these kinds of privacy and security questions, how can that impact the deal?
Well, I mean, I'd say the biggest thing the biggest issue could be, potentially if their security situation is, really immature, it could, delay the deal. I'm not sure, depending on just how their posture is, if it's going to kill the deal. I've not seen that, but I have seen, hey, you need to get some new plans in place. We need to make investments really day zero to get your, cyber posture secure. Making sure the company is on board with spending money to kind of get that in place. I think the other way it could evolve is depending on the history of the company, any breaches they've had and the response to it. What liability is out there for the company or ongoing liability from previous kind of incidents. So it's definitely something that you dig into a lot more, and depending on what you find could delay a transaction.
So my follow-up to that is kind of related. How can it, if at all, impact the rate of return on an investment?
I mean, well, the investment doesn't end up getting done, obviously, or the exit of the company doesn't end up getting done. That would affect it. I think, a lot of times when you sell a company, you're going to have to get some sort of escrow put into place. So that's going to be a percentage of the transaction value is going to be put into escrow. And, if you've had incidents in your past, that could be a much larger percentage. So it could delay your rate of return by delaying the amount of cash that gets in your pocket at close. Additionally, a lot of time insurance, agencies will underwrite that escrow. And if you have, lackluster cyber, policies, procedures in place, or have any incidents in your past, they might carve those out. So you won't get that cash at closing. So you could see it, really reducing your rate of return based solely on the cash flows that you're going to be receiving from an exit. Additionally, they might hold back a certain portion of the purchase price because they have to invest in upgrading your, cyber policies, procedures, infrastructure. The investment they're going to have to make, they're going to say, well, you should have made this, so we're not going to pay you as much at the exit because we have to go and spend this cash to fix all the problems that you had before, even if they still like the business. So it could impact your rate of return in a number of different ways.
So the rule of thumb is prevention. Do all these things in advance before they come talking to you.
Yes. And you're never done. One of the things, I think a lot of it is, are you doing the right things? Are you taking the right steps? Are you making, are you putting it at the forefront of your mind? It's one of those things, it can always be better. And, the bad guys can always figure out a way in. But if you have taken, the appropriate steps and more to show, hey, we're taking this seriously, we're putting the right things in place, we have the right mitigation strategies, with the right response strategies, then I think that's going to give a buyer or investor a lot more comfort in looking at your business.
So, Philip, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is what type of specific investments have you seen made in portfolio companies to manage cyber and privacy risks post-close? One thing that comes to mind that I'd love to hear your input on is corporate governance, about how you might want to separate out the IT function from the security function.
I think that's definitely a lesson learned that we have seen, is that, you have to have the security function reporting directly to, ideally the CEO, but potentially the COO and president. It can't be reporting up to the CTO, just because the CTO's job is to deliver technology, and they're trying to get the technology delivered, in the best, most efficient way possible that the salespeople can go out and sell. The security person's job is to make sure your infrastructure is secure and the software that's being put out is secure. Sometimes those are not in lockstep. So you need to make sure that security individual is reporting up separately and independently of the CTO and can provide kind of an unbiased feedback to the CEO, and then becomes a business decision. Certain items you might say, hey, we think the risk profile of this, security issue is not that big. It's gonna be something where there's no privacy data, there's no significant data, there's no, access to other systems. It's siloed. Might only be a sandbox of saying, hey, okay, I get this, but the business decision makes sense to, go forward with it. But you don't want the technology person making that decision. You want that to go kind of the CEO and the board to, understand the risk, understand, what the benefits are, and then they all make an informed decision. A couple of other factors that we make sure are in place now: multi-factor authentication. I mean, that's something that I've talked to a leading cyber attorney about. Is actually putting a deal rep in place to say that you have to have multi-factor installed for any access to your systems. I think that is 100% a best practice and something that we're doing now. So those would just be a couple of areas where I would think you've seen kind of deal terms starting to evolve based on kind of cyber risk.
So, Philip, is it fair to say you're starting to see, like you talked about, MFA being like a specific rep and warranty in the deal docs, as to where maybe before it just said something general about we'll have just administrative and technical cyber measures. Now it says you will have MFA, you will have endpoint detection. Are you starting to see it get more detailed around that in the deal documents themselves?
It's coming. I'm not sure it's 100% there yet. We're putting that in place, and it's definitely something that we are considering, not just considering, we're doing. And I think you're going to start seeing it more and more often, just because, actually, when you ask about post, closing investments, I think one of the biggest items is phishing. Your employees are your biggest, vulnerability. So we invested in a company called Fish Labs. We've since exited it, but they essentially provide kind of phishing, security awareness training, intervention, screening to try to keep your people from, clicking on links. And one of the things that if you click on a link, there's a multi-factor to be able to get into any item. Even if, you click on that link, you could still be protected. So I think every layer you can put into place to, keep your people from causing issues is just going to, decrease the likelihood that a bad actor can get into your system.
I know this makes you so happy.
Smiling.
Those 3 favorite letters, MFA.
Indeed.
So, Phil, we're talking a lot about the security measures, which are, of course, really important. Where are you seeing, if you can just share a little bit, from the privacy side, how have any of the different privacy laws, for example, impacted the different your due diligence efforts and how companies are approaching their privacy measures?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the different kind of language that's going into contracts. Especially GDPR. Anybody who's working in Europe has to be compliant with GDPR. That's definitely a bigger issue. Anybody working in California, the whole privacy world is unique because different states have different measures. Obviously, I just mentioned California, different countries have different measures. So a lot of that, I think, falls into kind of the language and contracts, and really that's something in diligence that we have our attorneys dig into deeply to make sure that everything's structured in a way that's CCA compliant, GDPR compliant, or any other state specific privacy laws that are in place that our companies have to comply with.
I think that's really interesting. I often will talk to some smaller companies who say, oh, I'm too small for some of those. And I think what this conversation is highlighting, and what I always tell them is, okay, but if you ever want to have investment, it's going to come up in the diligence process. So now would be a really good time to start thinking about it. And I think that syncs with what you've just shared as well. You're looking for these types of issues and what their preparation is as you're going through diligence.
Yeah, and I think part of it depends on the stage of the company. I think that's a good point. If you're really early stage, sometimes it's again back to the business risk versus it's basically the business risk. Where you try to say I'm willing to take this risk because I am so early stage. One thing you can think about as an early stage company, or are there some, especially on privacy, are there some smaller steps you could take? There's some boilerplate language. There's some things you can do. I hate using the term check the box, but if you're a super early stage CEO listening to this, take a few extra steps. Talk to your attorney to get some just basic boilerplate documents, language, procedures put into place. And that way you're a step ahead of the game. I think sometimes it's very intimidating to think about how much work needs to be done to be compliant versus a lot of this is somewhat off the shelf at this point, where you can at least have step one done at an early stage, or step 1, 2, and 3 done. And it might not be as big of a leap as it was 5, 6 years ago when a lot of this was just coming out. A lot more of it's out there in the public domain right now to be able to go ahead and implement.
Makes sense.
So, Philip, what do you like to see in your due diligence process when it comes to portfolio companies managing cyber and privacy risk?
I think it's tough to say exactly what you want to say. I think one of the biggest items is an attitude towards privacy. And it's funny. I've got to say, it's SOC 2 is basically BS. I mean, you could have that put into place, but at the end of the day, if you're not actually following everything in there, all you've done is spend a bunch of money on a great checklist of things you have gotten done. I think it's the whole attitude towards security, that it's front of mind on these CEOs, that they're really living it, that they're saying, hey, we're putting in place multi-factor, we've put in place multi-factor, we've put in place phishing training, we're doing these we're actively making sure that our employees are aware of the vulnerabilities out there versus just doing a bunch of forms that check a box.
I would love to expand a little bit when you said, it's top of mind. And obviously, those are some of the really tactical steps that CEOs can take. Where do you see a company successful with making it throughout the whole organization? So if you can share a little bit, if I've done my MFA, if I've put those measures in place, what does it look like to not just have that SOC 2 checklist, but to actually have it be a part of the organization?
Yeah, I think it's really just, and one big thing is just the whole security awareness training, that you make sure that it's not optional to complete, that it's one of those things that for your employees, they need to complete their security awareness training every month. I mean, that's just a period, end of sentence. And if you don't, you're no longer going to work at the company. Versus some companies like, oh yeah, we've signed up for, this vendor or that vendor, got about, 40% compliance, but whatever. I think that's more of just the attitude towards making sure that you're being proactive, you're taking the steps, you're making the investments. When you take on investment that, when I say, SOC 2 is BS, I mean that's a little tongue in cheek. You still want the company to say, I'm going to go invest in this. I'm going to go invest in, you need PCI compliance. I'm going to go invest in high trust. You're making that, but at the end of the day, it's actually implementing those items and really pushing it to your employees to make sure that they are taking the measures they need to take to be safe. Password, security, are they, you can't just have password 1, 2, 3. You actually have to have more complicated passwords. You have to change them on a regular basis. You have to, again, multi-factor to change a password. I think there's just a lot of steps that you want to see your companies taking versus just these checkbox things that, you still need to do, but at the end of the day, aren't going to actually protect you.
So on that note, given all that you've learned from privacy and security, what is your favorite privacy and security tip that you share with your friends when you're at a backyard barbecue?
Yeah, because that's always what I'm talking about, backyard barbecue.
Absolutely.
Sadly, Philip, that's what we talk about.
It's going to sound repetitive probably, but it's multi-factor. I think that's the single most important thing you can have in place. That is security awareness training, just to keep it front of mind. But I think multi-factor is the easiest thing you can do. Everyone's used to it at this point. Before people say, oh, my people aren't going to like doing it. And frankly, it's just kind of table stakes. And if you're not doing it, you're being lazy. I've got to do it to log on to any system here at Fulcrum. And yes, I have to go click an extra button or send an extra text message or do whatever that multi-factor is. It's in place for that system, but it's worth it at the end of the day. It doesn't take that much time.
It's a leading tip that we get on our show.
It is. So, Philip, when you're not out helping entrepreneurs and being on boards of companies, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, Well, it used to be a lot more fun, but now I've got a soon-to-be 6 and 4-year-old. So most of my free time is centered around them and coaching t-ball, and now an assistant coach on my daughter's soccer team. So love that. If I do have any free time away from coaching kids athletics, love playing golf, love going out to dinner with my wife. Those would probably be some of the things. Love a beach trip every year, and if you can ever get a weekend away without the kids at the beach, that's always fun. Those would be a few of the things. Mostly coaching kids sports at this point, though.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to connect and learn more, where should they go?
You can find all my contact information at our website, fulcrumep.com. Feel free to email me, pl@fulcrumep.com. At Philip Lewis on Twitter, Philip with 1L. So those would be a few places. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for sharing all of this really important information for entrepreneurial and growing companies.
Of course. Thanks for having me today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.